Well, I think the other aspect here is Fauci. And Fauci repeatedly said in congressional testimony that we were not funding gain of function research over and over and over and over again. And the quantity and just the disruptive nature of these lies during the COVID-19 pandemic, when he presented himself as the figurehead of science, and yet he was telling the American people exactly the opposite of the truth in many cases, often saying, this was a white lie. Like when they said that PPE wasn't helpful, that you shouldn't wear masks during COVID. And then they said, oh, you should wear masks. And then you wait for the reason. And they said, the reason was we lied to the public because we didn't want them to buy all the PPE, yep. And then all of the science and all the medical staff wouldn't be able to get PPE. So they admitted they lied, and then they come out and say that they are the science. There has to be accountability for this.
This your point about moving on, right? Just like the Jay said, wouldn't we want to move on from Fauci? I mean, isn't that part of Trump? I mean, he said today he doesn't want any retribution. He wants to move on. He doesn't want to politicize things. Isn't that part of what we need to do as a country?
So sometimes we need to resolve. The problem with COVID in general is that it peeled the Band-Aid off of the way that a lot of our elite institutions are abusing their power over people. And so one of the things, be it school closures, and then you have this big focus on looking at education and trying to figure out, having parental rights, trying to balance these different issues. And suddenly you have a former governor of Virginia running for governor again, coming out and saying that he doesn't want parents deciding what their kids learn in school. And over again, you see, and, I'm glad to be sitting with you, Ro, because I think you have a track record of standing against some of the worst abuses I've seen from your party and the elites who generally agree with it. But I think a lot of the corruption that we've seen in this country was unveiled in COVID. And we have to solve it. And that's why we have a big populist movement. That's why we had a populist movement on the left, too, with Bernie Sanders. But, one of the things I really focus on in my book is how these big donors are funding these initiatives that are pushing, all these nonprofits are pushing ideas that are being almost forced on the American people through the elite apparatus.
There, I agree with you sometimes, and I don't want to interrupt you, but I said sometimes my staff, they send me their 200 groups who have come out for something, and I said they're 200 groups run by 100 people. This is exactly the biggest myth in terms of all these groups. So I agree with you that sometimes they can make us be out of touch on certain issues.